It's been 7 hours and 15 days.
Shaved head, doe-eyed, clear of voice. It was this 1990 cover of a Prince song that catapulted Sinead O'Connor to global stardom.
Nothing compares. Nothing compares to you.
She'd go on to make 10 studio albums in all, nominated for Grammys and MTV Awards, cementing her place in the 90s indie scene. But if Sinead didn't look like a pop star, that's because she didn't want to be one.
It looked like I was going to be successful. That kind of freaked me out a bit, you know what I mean? I started crying when my first record began to do well.
Her attitude was, be a punk, be individual and speak your truth.
But it was this moment in 1992, tearing up a photo of the Pope on Saturday Night Live, a protest against child sex abuse, that ignited a firestorm.
Fight the real enemy!
She's saying, I believe that good will triumph over evil, but for that to happen, the Catholic Church needed to be punished.
American audiences went on the attack. Death threats and radio boycotts followed. Frank Sinatra wanted to, quote, kick her ass. Sinead, a victim of cancel culture decades before it was a thing.
And everything she said turned out to be true, of course.
They got a silent case of the emperor's new clothes.
O'Connor was open about her struggles with bipolar disorder.
It's a funny little illness because it affects different people differently. Some people dress up as Tutankhamun and go shopping, you know. I got very suicidal, which I can laugh about now because it's funny. It wasn't funny at the time.
She was ordained a Catholic priest in the 1990s before later converting to Islam in 2018.
I never thought that I would join any particular religion. Then I actually left Islam till last because I had such a huge amount of prejudice about it, actually, you know. Muslims are very tender and very loving people.
Her renegade legacy remembered today by fans and colleagues.
As beautiful as any girl around and never traded on that card. I love that about her. Iconoclast.
Rest in power, Queen.
I hope she realised how much love there was for her.
The suicide of her youngest son 18 months ago, leaving her devastated. Her final tweets reading, "He was the only person who ever loved me unconditionally. The love of my life, the lamp of my soul. We were one soul in two halves." Sinead O'Connor, singer, artist, activist, punk, a truth teller and a trailblazer, gone too soon.
Oh, Danny boy, the pipes, the pipes.
The reason why people like me are singers is because the best way we communicate is through songs.
And I will sleep in peace until you come to me.
Just a sad loss, and of course her son, wow, so tragic. If you find yourself in need of help, crisis support is available 24/7 through Lifeline. That number's 13 11 14.
Let's go to Irish radio host Dermot Whelan. He worked with Sinead and even lived on the same street as her. Dermot, behind the public persona, what was Sinead O'Connor really like?
Great question, because I think that's one of the things that's most commonly misunderstood about Sinead is that, you know, she was a very quiet, self-deprecating, often shy person, and very different to the persona that I think would have been broadcast around the world, particularly at the start of her career. And I guess it's a side that, you know, a lot of people wouldn't be aware of, that she was a very private and often shy person, as I said.
Yeah, the thing that really a lot of people think about is that ripping up of the picture of the Pope, and she said that having a #1 album derailed her career, and ripping up that photo of the Pope put it back on track. So what did she mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a Sinead O'Connor thing to say, isn't it? You know, I guess it's because she was never comfortable in the pop star role. You know, I think after the release of her album, The Lion and the Cobra, she found herself being put into this sort of pop star box that maybe acts like Madonna were comfortable in, but she was never comfortable in that space. And I think once that Saturday Night Live event happened, I think she found herself swimming against the current, you know, across the globe pretty much overnight. And I think in a weird way, that's where she was most comfortable. It was in that struggle and that fight, particularly against the establishment and the music industry.
Yes, that's exactly, that's the distillation. It's why in the story, the package we just did, we called her punk. Like there's something about going against the grain that just she seemed unable to help doing, just was always there. But did that take a toll on her?
Yeah, I think it did. But, interestingly enough, there was a documentary that came out on our side of the world. I know I'm in Australia now, but, back home in recent months, there was a documentary called Nothing Compares. And it really showed an insight into Sinead's early life, and I think a lot of her pain and anguish came from physical abuse from her mother. And, I think people misunderstood that about her. And she had a lot of internal pain. And I think sometimes she was seen to be, merely acting out and looking for attention. And I don't think people really understood the level of trauma that she carried with her. Of course she was punk in her approach to her music and her attitude, as we said, to the music industry and the people who controlled it. But, on a personal level, she was fighting, internally as well. And I think that's what came across in her music. But obviously that's what came across as well in those sort of more public displays, like the tearing up of that picture, which she I guess in later years, she didn't really want to talk about that. She really wished the world would move on from that moment. But I guess if it wasn't for that pivotal moment, she wouldn't have influenced all the people that she did influence, throughout her career.
We were talking in the office today about her relationship with Ireland and I guess her Irishness, you could say, how you couldn't really, when you would think about her, you would also think of Ireland. How will she be remembered in Ireland?
I think to a large extent, obviously her music will live on. And as I mentioned, her musical influences, I mean, she has influenced people from Miley Cyrus to Michael Stipe, PJ Harvey, Alanis Morissette, the Cranberries from my home city of Limerick. So her musical influences will live on for generations. But I think to a large extent, and even in her home country and in her hometown of Dublin, I still think there will be a lot of people who still will misunderstand her. I think she was a misunderstood character for many years and for most of her life in terms of the baggage that she was carrying around and how that was expressed through her music. But I think particularly, looking back over her musical career and the people who did really know her, I think they'll just remember a really creative, loving, and very brave individual who's going to be sadly missed.
Dermot, thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thanks, guys.
She's definitely a presence. I actually almost forgot until this happened today. Sinead O'Connor is the first person I ever interviewed.
Really?
Amazing.
Yeah? No, it was for print.
Wow.
The Age, for some reason, in Melbourne just said, can you interview her? I don't know why. It was good. I mean, I was the worst person to ask. But
that was your first ever interview.
And so it was over the phone. She was in Ireland, and it was a bit of a scratchy line, but even there, it was like she just occupied space without saying anything.
Yeah.
And it was intimidating, maybe because of my first interview, but even so, it was just, there was just something, there was an energy and a kind of sense of, don't say something dumb, because she's going to know.
Yeah.
And it was a really interesting part. I think she must have released an album. It was a really interesting part of her life because I think she'd had a lot of that experience with the Catholic Church, and she's Catholic. And she said this quote, which I definitely remember clear as a bell, and I remember including it, where she said, God doesn't need religion, but religion needs God. And that sort of summed up, there was always that spiritual dimension to her. And obviously in the end she becomes a Muslim, which was quite a big deal in the Muslim community, I remember that. And so she reconciled herself with religion eventually. But there was something about her anger at the Catholic Church. It wasn't like it wasn't a rejection of the underlying stuff. There was always a spiritual dimension to her, as there was an intensity. It was just an extraordinary experience.
Amazing.
Yeah.